Welcome to In Layman's Terms with Nohra. Our guest today is Patrick Casey. Actually, Patrick, what I love about your work is I did a bunch of prep, but the first question is so easy. But before I ask you the first question, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are and who our audience is. So in
Okay.
layman's, it's basically for someone who where I was, 20, 30 years ago, where you're so busy raising your family, paying your taxes, watching a little football on the weekend, spending time with your buddies, that you don't have time to get deep into any of the issues of the day, even though
hmm
you know these issues are important. So for
Sure.
me, what I try to do is I try to simplify a lot of the things like wonks like you and I, like you and me, that we do, and I try to make it in a way that someone can come in, watch an hour, and go, I kind of get this particular situation, fill in the blank. So tell me about you, and tell me about Restore America. I love what that invokes in my mind, but obviously I want to hear what the real person who's actually doing it. Tell me how you got to this. You can start when you were growing up, where you grew up, and all the way up to where we are today, and we're going to discuss how we're going to restore America.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on. So, I guess I can start at the beginning. I was raised in a moderate conservative Catholic household. Like, anyone growing up in the suburbs back in the day, it was, unless you were really committed to being a liberal, the sort of status quo, the default was you were a Republican. And so my family wasn't terribly, they were definitely conservative, but not super ideologically committed. That again was just kind of the status quo. Now, in recent years, unfortunately, that appears to have changed. Suburbs of Northern Virginia, not quite as red as they used to be, from what I've gathered. But I didn't really give politics too much thought. When I went to college, I studied anthropology. I was interested in the
Right.
people who would go to remote tribes and live with them for a few years and just different perspectives on the human experience. I was interested in archaeology, but then in 2016 I became very interested in politics, largely thanks to most entirely thanks to Donald Trump. And that's just everything's kind of followed from there. I graduated college around then, so it was go work as an archaeologist, entry level, or I just wanted to be involved in politics. So that's what I did. I've been involved in the online right, or I guess you could say the dissident right, for some time. And, I've done all sorts of things, but these days I'm a writer. I write for Chronicles Magazine, The Blaze. I've been published in the American Conservative, all sorts of places. I have a Substack. I have a weekly podcast called Restoring Order, and I post on Twitter quite a bit. So, I live here in DC. I've got lots of friends. You're very close to the ground, so to speak, talking to the, kind of young professional class, the people who are, running the government now. A lot of these guys were watching YouTube videos back in high school of Trump in 2016, and they got motivated to, work in the government. And some of these people are working pretty significant jobs. So it's a wonderful time to be in the area, and it's a great time to be an American. I'm very optimistic about the future of the country, but I definitely don't think we should rest on our laurels. So I'm sure we'll be getting into
Oh yeah.
all sorts of related questions and topics. But so I'll leave it there.
That's great. So you grew up you said in the suburbs of Virginia, northern suburbs of Virginia. Is that what you said?
Yeah, yeah, that's
So,
right.
big Fairfax school board thing going on right now. I know that's a interesting thing. And, it's funny. When I was a very young investor in venture capital, I did life sciences, but one of our divisions was media. And they had Loudoun County, they had cable. But this was 30 years ago, right? So,
Hmm.
I mean, that cable company did an amazing job because the area was growing so much. So it's kind of a small world that way. So, um, let's go to uh, your beginning and involvement, and then how you are today. I really want to talk about your mission and what you mean by restore. So you conservative 2016 started getting involved. What kind of involvement was that? Was that campaigning? Was that lobbying? Was that what kind of?
Mostly social media stuff.
Oh,
Yeah, back then I was very yeah. Twitter was what got me into all of this, and that's how I've met so many wonderful people. Yeah, it's been when Donald Trump in 2016 praised the keyboard warriors, that's kind of what I've been. Yeah, I
Okay.
did a little campaign work in the most recent presidential election, but I'm hesitant to call myself an influencer, but yeah, most it's been social media stuff for predominantly. Now there's a rich, like I said, offline sort of political side, but in terms of like the work that I'm doing, what I'm spending most of my time on, writing, editing, posting stuff, podcasting, making videos. So it's yeah, I've been doing all of that in some form or another since 2016.
Okay. Okay. So let's jump right into it. So restore. Let's restore. What is the goal? What are we restoring and why? And again, I probably know, but my audience might or
Sure,
might
sure.
not understand what we mean here. And I
Right.
think it's really important that they do because I think your mission is crucial.
Thank you. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So, when it comes to what are we restoring, we're obviously restoring our country and more broadly Western civilization, because I am very concerned about what's going on in Europe, in other Anglosphere countries like Australia. I do have like kind of a civilizational sense of consciousness, and it's not just that America, but I care about my country more. And given that America is the superpower, given that we are a lot of European countries are basically kind of vassals or protectorates of us, and I think that's not ideal. And I definitely support Trump's push to get European countries to spend more on defense and and try to inject a little bit of life back into them. But when it comes to really what we're restoring in America, there's basic stuff like law and order on the streets. There's border security. Donald Trump's done a lot on both of these issues. Look forward to seeing more. But there's also like the bigger philosophical perspective on this, which is that America, over the course of the 20th century and unfortunately continuing into the 21st century, has undergone some profound changes to the point where, Christopher Caldwell, he wrote an excellent book on civil rights law and the changes in the 60s. Basically, it was almost as if a new country were created. Now, this isn't to say that everything about the pre civil rights, pre 60s America was good, but it's important to understand that a lot has changed. A lot has changed. And as a result of that, there have been some good changes, there have been some bad changes. So we really have to look at the changes over the course of the 20th century that were negative, that got us to where we are today. You don't have to support Jim Crow to recognize that civil rights law is used to discriminate against whites, men, Christians, so on and so forth. Some of these laws, these more broadly, these social movements were, at least in theory, designed to prevent anyone from being discriminated against based on their race, ethnicity, gender. But in practice, that's not at all how it played out. So there's the immigration. There's this whole idea of America just being a country that is defined like that only has moral value in the extent to which it repudiates its dark, bigoted past. And again, there's stuff in the past that I certainly wouldn't call for today, like slavery as one thing. But at the end of the day, there are conservative ways of dealing with these issues, and then there are liberal ways, and the liberal ways have been the prevailing ones, which are you basically just have to tear down the statues of great American men. Why? Because they were patriarchal white slave owners. And even if they didn't own slave, well, they're still just racist white guys or whatever. So we're a nation that has essentially been turned on itself in the sense that we are many of our institutions, a large share of the country has been turned on our past, on our identity, on our culture, and it's just really not a good place to be. So there's a lot more I could say about restoring order, but generally speaking, it's about recognizing that we've lost a lot about what America made America great to begin with, and but also recognizing that we can't recreate the America of the 1800s or the 1700s, and so we have to find some kind of balance between the old America and the new.
It's a great perspective, and I'm going to follow up on this a lot. But from for me, I came to the United States in 1975, and between 1975 and now, I have actually watched the struggle you're mentioning. I have watched the
Yeah, I would imagine.
ideological warfare that's been taking place, and and as a first generation immigrant, I so love this country, and I don't understand people who don't.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, so for me it's more of a question. For you it's even better because you're actually on a mission to justify to people like me why this is such an amazing place, even though I know it in my heart and I've lived it. Uh, so so who who would you say is your ideological, uh, I have to watch words because we don't want to be inflammatory, adversaries? Who are your ideological adversaries? And then we're going to talk how we get to, if we can deal with them, or we how we take away their influence.
Sure. Would you like to hear my adversaries on the right or my adversaries on the left? Because
No,
unfortunately,
I believe in unity. Ronald
yeah.
Reagan's "Don't say anything bad," 11th commandment. So let's go to the left, and then maybe we'll go
Okay.
to the right a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, so I would say my enemies or my adversaries will be a little more guarded with our language here. On the left, it's essentially the left. Now, look, I think most people in America have, at least one friend or family member who is a liberal or a Democrat, even if they're just casually so. And I don't really see that changing. So I wouldn't say that my enemies are my adversaries. There I go again. Are anyone who like votes Democrat or has liberal opinions. I definitely wouldn't say that. There are a lot of good people I think are misguided. A lot of people who might vote Democrat and still object to a lot of the more radical stuff left of center. But at the end of the day, they still vote for that party because they just can't bring themselves to support Trump. So I would say that generally speaking, it's the people in power and the committed activists left of center. It's the people in the deep state who are trying to subvert Trump's agenda. It's activist judges, rogue woke prosecutors. It's hostile like Marxist academics, Antifa terrorists. These are the sorts of people that I view as the primary adversaries, and you could also throw in left wing influencers there. It's a very long list, unfortunately. But I think it is important to differentiate between just the average person who votes Democrat. They're wrong to do so. Just to be clear, we don't have to be relativistic. But there, it's important that we recognize that there are going to be liberals and conservatives going forward. I think a good way of looking at how a goal that we can achieve is trying to get to the point where what the right and the left disagree on, it's no longer stuff that previously there used to be a broad consensus on, like the fact that children can't like take pills or go undergo surgery to become like the other gender. I mean, I understand the argument against adults doing that, but it's like I am a Catholic. I don't think that's right, but the fact that children, it's now debated whether or not children should be legally allowed to do that is insane. We should have a broad bipartisan consensus on the fact that we need to have strong borders. The Democrats always talk a big game about securing the border because they understand that it's a very important issue to people, especially independents, not to mention, obviously Republicans. And but they never do anything about it. And what they do about the border is undoing all of the policies that Republicans do to secure the border. So we need to get back to the point where there are going to be liberals, there are going to be conservatives, but what we're disagreeing on aren't these like fundamental civilizationally existential issues, right? We should be disagreeing about tax policy, about healthcare, about maybe some cultural stuff. And back in the day, this isn't to say there weren't problems in the post-war 20th century, but you really did have far more of a broad consensus. These issues were not nearly as contested and as divisive as they are now. Barack Obama, when he was running for, I can't remember if it was his initial, I think it was his first run, maybe it was his reelection, but he opposed gay marriage explicitly. Okay, well, now we're at the point where a lot of Republicans are like pro gay marriage, and I'll be honest, it's not like really a main issue for me, but it's kind of going to show like how far things have changed. The '94 crime bill that Biden was a big supporter of massively ramped up police. It was, for the most part, a pretty solid bill. You had Bernie Sanders talking about open borders is a Koch brothers policy. Hillary Clinton supporting a border wall. This was within my lifetime, within
Yeah.
your lifetime as well, and the lifetime of most people, I'm sure, watching this.
Yeah.
So we need to get back to that point. And my adversaries are the people that are against that.
Okay. So I've always tried to, uh, when I put on my political hat, you probably know I ran for governor here in our state in 2022, and the way tell me if you agree with my math. Oh, well, I guess
Okay,
my bell curve. I think there are 20% of the left on the extreme side that are irreparable. Everything you said that even Hillary Clinton and so on were for, were or against, as recently as 20 years ago, these people now want to push on America. And then you have the center left, which is, let's say, is at 20 to 30%, and then the, probably same kind of proportions on the right. But what do you do to combat that 20% that's so uh, just off. As you say, it has nothing to do with who we are as a country. Like you say, I don't understand. My parents were immigrants. I don't understand open borders. We stood in line. We took tests. We filled out
sure.
forms. Uh, so what's the mentality of that 20% that uh, open up the borders, change genders as soon as somebody's can speak, much less think, and on and on. All these issues that honestly I think made President Trump win the last time, because independents kind of thought, "Whoa, this has gone a little too far." COVID, the way COVID was handled. So, what do you think about that? Right? How do you combat that 20%? Because yeah, sure, Antifa's on the streets and they worry us because they're supposedly violent and they'll do bad things, but you've got public health authorities, you've got president of
Right.
universities, you've got media, president of media. So how is that, how do we, and how does somebody like you who wants to restore our values from 20 years ago, uh, how do you do that?
It's a tough question. You're right to draw a distinction between the shock troops on the streets and the officials who have actual power. Now, Antifa is obviously part of a power structure. That isn't to say that they don't have a role to play in left wing tyranny, but it is to say that we shouldn't focus on them as the. They're absolutely wretched, just to be clear. And in fact, as far on like an interpersonal level, they're probably like the worst. There are a lot of, I live here in DC. I walk through Georgetown on a nice summer day, and I'm surrounded by people who are probably deep state employees, and they're perfectly pleasant people to be around. Whereas, Antifa, these people are like drug addicts and they have facial tattoo. Yeah, they're freaks. But despite those differences, they ultimately are on the same side. So what do we do about the 20%, which obviously encompasses both the freaks on the street rioting and also the more influential people in working in NGOs and in the federal bureaucracy and for the DNC? Well, you need power. At the end of the day, power is the means to whatever political ends one might have, regardless of what you believe in. Power comes in many forms. It can be obtained in different ways. I think that state power obviously is it's not the end all be all, but it is what the right absolutely can do. Like we can't take over. I was going to say we can't take over the media, but then I remembered Barry Wise bought or someone bought CBS for Barry Wise. So I guess you can, yeah. Elon bought Twitter, but generally, and I'm not.
Or
Barry
here
Wise is
you
not really right wing. She's like an anti woke liberal. So I'm not saying that like I'm. That's like a huge win for the right. It's a huge win for not being like super far left, but obviously, as far as I'm concerned, it takes a little more than that. So we need state power because taking over other institutions, when the left took over a lot of these institutions, like the media, academia, when they built up nonprofits, I mean, the door was wide open to do all of these things. They used free speech during the 60s and the 70s to get their feet in the door in universities and other institutions. And oddly enough, stopped supporting that free speech. They found that they were no longer as keen on it as they originally thought once they had power. And that's often, many such cases, that's
That's how it
often how it
goes.
goes.
Yeah.
So, but the state is, and I think Trump has demonstrated this twice, is an institution that works for us, that we can absolutely get, if we get the right people in, there's a very clear process. I absolutely believe that in 2020, that process was disrupted unfairly and unjustly, illegally. But we won again, so we don't have to be we don't have to dwell on that. But the point here is that we need to focus on power, and the state is the best way to do that. Thinking you can take over the New York Times or you're going to take over Harvard, no. But you can use the state to punish these other institutions. If you look at some of the deals, just as kind of the last thing to bolster my argument here, if you look at some of these deals that Trump struck with these various universities that were, and I'm sure still are, uh, responsible for promoting left-wing, anti-American, anti-white, all sorts of good stuff, ideologies, he said, if you want, we're going to fine you tons of money. And if you want a lot more money, if you want to actually get money from us, well, here's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to stop discriminating against white people. You're going to have to stop discriminating against Christians and Jews and other groups. Basically, you're going to have to not do DEI. You're going to have to do X, Y, and Z. And that's the kind of example. That's an example of the right wielding power in a wise and fruitful way. And it goes to show that you can't take over every institution as a right winger. You can't read about what the left did in the mid to late 20th century and think that we can just do all of that. You really should be looking at the last 10 years for examples of what to do and what not to do.
Okay. And you're right. I mean, they captured so many of the important institutions. Luckily, your presence tells me that we're the other side, the right side, or right with a capital R, is beginning to get their voice heard. Obviously, X, Twitter has made a huge difference. Um, and I think another advantage that we do have, people who want the truth out there to be had. Um, Media is changing so much. I had an interview with someone who had been in the media, and people trust you more than they trust CBS News at night,
I
right?
believe that.
So just
Yeah,
imagine, and you're young, you talk, you're articulate, and they see you rather than. So she was saying, the press, the mainstream press takes their version of a story and tells it to people, and young people are saying, I don't buy that. I want Patrick to tell me what's going on, because at least I know where he stands, instead of like some nefarious agenda that doesn't
sure.
necessarily. So I think we're moving in the right direction. What I worry, where I want to see what you're doing is how do you convince the middle, for lack of a better word, of what you just told me early on, which is, hey, all these things were good, but they've gone way too far. And how do you get the middle to say we all stand together, that great things happen, civil rights, these were all good things, but way, way too far right now, and way, way too many institutions. And if the middle gets that, then I think, the political, you win more victories politically, both federal and state, and things start moving in the other direction. And hopefully you end up in some center place that everybody could agree with. And then we can have, hopefully, a respectful debate. So how do you, so if I gave you the mission, let's restore America, but we need to get the middle on our side.
Yeah, winning over moderates, independents, these are obviously very important tasks to any political cause or particularly, political campaign. Really depends on the election cycle. I think like which issues are the hot button issues. There was a lot in 2024. There were obviously so many problems stemming from the Biden administration, the border being a big one that normal people were certainly activated and saw. The average person does not like seeing, like, you're hearing that like hundreds of thousands of murderers have made it over the southern border. Seeing these insane clips, a lot of this, these days, it's just based on what you clips of what you're seeing in the world and you base your opinion on that rather than the data. And, so if you're seeing clips of people crossing the border, if you're seeing clips of people like, just stampeding across the border totally lawlessly, the average person does see that and think that it's a problem. Um, so that's that. But we're kind of finding ourselves in a weird situation now where, because people aren't seeing that anymore, these are the same people who voted for mass deportations, I'm sure, in many cases. Now, what they're seeing is immigrants being illegal immigrants, I should say, being hauled off by ICE. And they're saying, oh, this is kind of mean. I've been a little concerned by some of the polling data that I've seen. So, how do you keep the moderates on side? I think you just really need to focus on advancing a positive vision for the country. And it can't be entirely based on owning the libs, so to speak. It can't be totally, uh, negatory, based on, negating what the other side is about. It needs to be based on a positive, life affirming sense of, vision for the future of the country. And there's a lot that can come into that. But I think if you look at what the other side has done that's unpopular, it's the open borders and it's the racial preferences. Anti DEI stuff, very, very successful, very popular. And but Trump's doing away with a lot of that, and that's a good thing. But that also means that you have to find something else to run on in 2028. So I think we just need to be truthful with regard to what we're about, but also be practical and strategic when it comes to making these arguments and making the case for what we're about.
Yeah, and I think that what you just said is very important because I'm trying to become, even though I'm a conservative, I'm trying to become the moderate whisperer.
Mm.
Okay, and the reason why is and that's why I'm encouraging you to always look at that segment because this was pretty amazing to me and almost shocking. So when Charlie Kirk got shot, our side, we were horrified, we were sad, we were just absolutely just shattered by it because I'd watch him every day and I'd see the things he's doing, and I was involved with Turning Point USA during the campaign, and I spoke at some of their big speeches in Vegas. So, and I had met him a couple times. So, our side, again, we know how our side felt, and you could see it on in our echo chamber.
Right.
Uh, the left, probably a lot of them just silently rejoiced. Many of them openly rejoiced, which is just absolutely despicable. But the middle, where I was spending a lot of my time, the middle would say most people in the middle that I surveyed, and I was doing that on purpose, would say to me, "Yeah, yeah, right wing activist, just got shot." I'm like, "That's what you guys think? A right wing activist just got shot?"
Right.
When
Yeah.
when
It just happened.
it
Right.
was
Kind of what
just
they make it
hardly.
sound like.
I kept thinking, no, when so I sit down with, and I'm one person talking to maybe 8 people, right? That's nothing. And I'd say, no, no, you don't understand. Um, uh, Charlie engaged the whole young generation that had been betrayed by us during COVID, and are being led array with education and the kind of things that they're learning, which are not correct. And finally, they were coming home and realizing that their instincts were always right, and he was the person that was doing this. So just to actually say it was an activist that was shot, please, learn. So this is the kind of stuff that I again, I want to encourage you when you're doing your work to remember that they don't see things, not because they're bad people, but they just don't see things the way we do. They don't have like you say, the border became so obvious
Right.
because every day you turn on your TV and it's like thousands of people walking in, and at some point, even even the middle people say this is crazy, and then the same with some of the DEI things and so on. But but otherwise, on the things that you and I worry about that are basic, civics, um, a lot of them just don't pay attention or don't know. So how can I increase your audience with them so that they go, Patrick's got some amazing points about this country of ours, and I still remember my parents saying this. So that's kind of the question here.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting question because I think the people who watch my podcast, it's kind of a niche podcast. It's not huge. There's an audience, but I think these tend to be very politically engaged people. So they're probably the opposite of the people you're trying to reach. Maybe I should be asking you how to talk to these people. But look, I think when you deliver good government, the average person becomes less interested in politics. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Now, you still want these people to keep voting for you so you can continue delivering good government. But there's evidence that the 2010s sort of culture war stuff has kind of died down. If you look, for example, Google Trends, the searches for feminism, as one example, spiked, peaked some point. 2014 was one peak, 2017 was another peak. And we're now down to about the lowest searches for feminism since Google Trends started tracking these things in 2004. So what that tells me is, and Scott Alexander, this guy who writes this blog, Slate Star Codex, I think it's called. I think he might have slightly changed the name when he made a Substack, but he had a very lengthy post that I read a few years ago, and he was arguing with tons of similar data points like that people are like a little less engaged. So I think that is a good thing. But the problem that we have is as wokeness recedes somewhat, I don't think it's entirely going away. It's definitely we've declined in wokeness, so to speak, since Trump took over. You have a lot of institutions, be they businesses or media that are, not really, you see the culture with some of the movies coming out. It's not really doesn't feel as woke. Like fewer sports teams during Pride Month or, spicing up their profile pictures with Pride stuff, with the rainbow avatar. There's still some of that, but it's clearly on the decline. So the problem again is you have to tell, I guess, what I would say is if you're talking to moderates and they agree that the stuff that we saw under Biden was bad, you have to keep reminding them that, they're just going to go right back in. Don't listen to what Newsom's saying. Don't listen to any of these people. They're liars. They're going to get right back in and do something very similar. And they're just going to try to be better at lying about it. Like with the border, they're going to, count, do what Obama did and count people turned away at the border as deportations, as if it's the same thing as what you're seeing with ICE, which is interior removals. So they're just going to be dishonest. But unfortunately, I think that's just kind of the back and forth of American politics, where one side gets in and people get sick of them, they vote in the other side or whatever. But I think we have a very good successor in the form of JD Vance, and I think that even it's going to be difficult compared to 2024, just because again, Biden had 4 years, screwed everything up. It was a historically disastrous presidency. Then you had the whole debacle with Kamala, who was far less popular and likable, and not to mention electable, than Biden. So it was really never a better time to get elected as a Republican. Okay, but we're gonna have our work cut out for us in 2028 because we're the incumbents, and people will find things to complain about and be unhappy about. So I think the pitch for Vance, and this is something that someone like you or other moderate whisperers can pass along to your target audience. Could just pitch as like, this is a normalcy candidate. Trump was he was definitely very chaotic. That needed to happen to shake up the status quo, to bring attention to the deep, profound rot and corruption in our political institutions. And, but Vance is like a more measured guy, right? So it's, he's more educated. He's, a little more laid back. It's not quite as bombastic. Now, for someone like me, I'm not going to say that's a bad thing about Vance, but I love all of that about Trump, right? I mean, he's the greatest to ever do it, as people on my side of Twitter love to say. But with Vance, there's definitely, we have to keep this going and just normalcy, right? People, good economy, no crazy woke laws, no open borders. That's got to be the pitch. And I would like to believe that's going to be a good pitch, because if the Democrats get back in charge, they're going to make the vindictiveness of the vengefulness of Biden's first and only term in office look like, they're going to take the training wheels off, so to speak. And it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, that's my biggest concern is with every time we have the a pendulum swing, it tends to be a little bit more uh, uh, drastic, or dramatic in its push. And of course, with President Trump, I think he had to do that because things had gone they were so out of control. You had to reset, and I don't know if people again. That's what I voted for, which is exactly what people say. These people get it, and we just I keep working on what I call the default vote. So the reason why I think a lot of tickets are split, and we won the presidency, but we didn't win a senator seat, is because I think the default to a lot of people, because of history, is is usually Democrat, especially like the new people that are coming into the movement, and it's really a movement. I believe that when I would speak at people would always say to me, "Oh, how can you speak at a Trump rally? All these white supremacists." I'm like, you know what? I speak at these rallies. I go and I talk to the audience myself. 10,000 people are there. I go and I walk
Right.
around. It is like a county fair with all races, all ages, all creeds, and guess what? Everybody's pleasant. So don't tell me it's a bunch of this is not a Nuremberg
Right.
Nazi rally.
Yeah,
Don't.
it's crazy. These people have their perception of everything is just so clearly shaped by people in the media who have an obvious agenda. I'm aware when conservative media is trying to get me to feel or think a certain way about something, and oftentimes I agree with them, but you just have that in the back of your head. Okay, well, they kind of want me to view things this way, so is that right? But these
Yeah.
people aren't that critical with their own side's media. So yeah, of course, like a Trump rally is like some dangerous thing where if your skin is the wrong shade of color, you're gonna they're gonna disappear you or something. It's clearly ridiculous.
Well, the thing that I like about it is that every passing day, the point is made that everything that's been painted is not what's happening. Not No one has lost their rights today who's homosexual, colored,
Right.
no one, right? The only thing that's going down is abuse and border. We're closing the border, and NGOs that were getting the circular money that went from us to them to their people to the Democratic Party to bad causes. I mean, yeah, that stopped. So too bad. But nobody who's actually an American citizen of any race, creed, orientation is having a problem. So that I think is the key, message that I think someone like you would talk about, which is, and again, to me, restoring, if I can add one thing to your agenda is let's put civics. If I was going to be governor, I was going to put civics back in high school. Let's teach kids to understand their country. And then as a result of that, they love it. So civics is one thing that I think is really important. So let me jump to something you kind of hinted about. And I think, you had a Cheshire cat smile on your face. So who is the adversary on the right now in your mind? Not,
Sure. So I think there's the sort of old guard, pre-Trump, anti-Trump GOP that would love to bring us back to a toothless Republican Party that only talks about issues like lower taxes and hawkish foreign policy. And just to be clear, I'm fine with low taxes. Low taxes are great, but when it comes to like it's got to be like the bare minimum. We need plenty of other things to happen. And the kind of Republican Party where they immigration restriction, strong borders, tough on crime, like committed to seriously fighting the left, crushing the left, obviously within the bounds of the law. Um, so that's we can't go back to that. Also, I take a lot of issue with there's kind of like an anti-Trump right on social media. I don't know how actually right wing these people are, but these are the people that have been obsessing over the Israel stuff over the last since October 7th. And I just want to be clear. I'm not talking about people who are saying that America should stay out of this. We shouldn't put boots on the ground. I'm not talking about people who have critiques of how much foreign aid we're giving to Israel or Ukraine or any country, right? I'm talking about the people that are saying you can't vote for Trump or support him because he's controlled by the Jews. He's controlled by Israel. That's clearly not like a moderate, non-interventionist perspective, the way someone like Pat Buchanan or the other paleo conservatives would voice, would talk about the issue. These a lot of these people are very bad actors. And it's a lot of idiocy. It's a lot of it's interesting because they accuse the rightly or wrongly, I'll let other people decide, the pro-Israel right of being solely focused on Israel, of demanding that you care more strongly about what's happening in that part of the world than you do in America. And they also accuse them of being very annoying about that. But then these people, it's kind of like you oftentimes, if you're not careful, you will end up becoming what you hate. And so now these people, despite the fact that they're on the other side of the Israel equation, are, um, they want you to, you know, they're talking about this other part of the world all the time. They're demanding that everything in American politics takes a backseat to, the Gaza genocide or whatever whatever's going on over there, and they're also very annoying about it. And I'm the kind of guy where I think a lot of these people are operating in bad faith. These are also some of these people will make these really dumb arguments like it's not about right versus left. It's the Zionists are just trying to divide us, man. That doesn't work because if that were the case, if it was all about being pro or anti-Israel, then these people are telling me that Stephen Miller's like an enemy of mine because he's pro-Israel, but Greta Thunberg is good because, again, if people don't want America to be involved in Israel in like wars in the Middle East, I happily will agree with that. People have the right to criticize Israel, criticize pro-Israel groups. But what these guys are doing is something very different. Now, it's not like these people have their own political party or anything, but it's more that they're trying to sabotage Trump and convince people that Trump is actually failing at everything. And it's because their motivations ultimately are not about what's good for America. They're about um, just like getting people to click in on their podcasts, or they have sketchy donors. And so it's on the one hand, you have people on the fringes, and on the other hand, you have kind of the pre-Trump GOP that would love the minute that Trump steps, off the stage to just bring us back to kind of a Mitt Romney sort of Republican Party. And I don't find either of those options acceptable.
Yeah. So I understand what you're saying, and I actually agree. The only solace I get about this, because I agree with you that the movement needs to continue, is that these people tend to be in a little bit of an echo chamber.
Yeah,
So I see the world as like, we all have echo chambers, and there's a wide echo chamber, then there are a bunch of little echo chambers. And I think that luckily, even though some of them have a lot of followers, when they start talking about this esoteric, weird, pro anti-Israel, why not? I think they really lose a lot of their crowd, other than real anti-Semites, which we don't want nothing to do with anyway. So I think we're gonna be okay on on that perspective. But yeah, you need people like you and me. We need to push back, because and with regards to the pre-Trump GOP, you know, MAGA is a populist movement that has now um, taken over the GOP, and that's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. The country club Republicans, we're done with that.
right.
We are for the people. We are for the. I want every single person in America to live the American dream, and I don't think that's what the country club people are thinking about. But that's
Mm,
what President Trump thinks about. That's what a lot of
sure.
people in the administration think about, and that's what people like you and I, like you and I, think about. So, so I don't see that now. Rhinos, so on and so forth. I usually stay away from that stuff, because the second you can vote 80 times the right way, you vote wrong, or you vote something else one time, and then you're a rhino. Like
Sure,
one
sure.
of the
People can be
politicians here,
overly critical. That's true.
my rep in the Congress, told me that. He goes, "Gee, I vote like 90% of the time the right way, and I vote one time off, and they're calling me rhino." He goes, you just ignore it. But I do think there's a generation, your generation, and maybe 20 years older, and then a couple of guys like me that are old but see the big picture the right way. Um, I don't think we're going back to the pre-Trump Republican Party. I don't. There's no room for that. in this coalition that's been created, and any smart politician who wants to win the actual become the candidate for us in 28 has got to understand that. And if they don't, then I think that's we got bigger problems. So that's
Yeah,
I hope you agree with that. I hope it's
I
kind
do.
of.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what's next on your agenda, and how are you going to get it done, and how can I help? Because I think what you're doing is just the word restore to me gives me goosebumps, because I know what you're saying in my heart. So anyway, so what's next?
That's good. I've got some projects behind the scenes I'm working on. There's a lot of stuff that I do that's public, like the writing, the tweeting, day-to-day basis. There's a lot of that. A lot of getting to know people as well. I spent 4 years living out here after, Trump lost or had the election stolen from him, I should say. And DC was not a happening place to be a right wing, guy during those 4 years, but especially with COVID and all that. But I live on the Virginia side, so once Youngkin won, it was a little more manageable. I think he's done a pretty good job overall, though this election, we'll see. Spanberger's not looking like the best, the person I want to preside over my state. But what I was getting at there is, I spent 4 years wondering, should I move to Florida? I had a lot of friends who moved to Texas, like right away, right after the Trump administration left, and I was kind of like, "Oh, what am I doing?" So, yeah, DC's popping. Great place to be. Great place to be right wing. I would encourage people to come out here and you know network and meet people. There are all sorts of events. There's good stuff happening. DC's got a lot of good restaurants too. It's a city that I think people on right wing Twitter who maybe haven't spent a lot of time here just kind of knock it. Oh, it's the swamp. Living here comes with its own pros and cons, but I encourage people to visit. It's a gorgeous city. There's a lot of good stuff to see. But anyways, in terms of my stuff, yeah, I'm just kind of doing the same thing I've been doing for a while now. Finding new places to get published. I do my own weekly podcast. Got the Substack, going on trips. I went to El Salvador and met with some of the right wing conservative expats and, some interesting people from El Salvador. While I was down there, there's a lot of great events happening across the country with cool people from Twitter and people who work, real political jobs. So I'm
Mhm.
just, yeah, I'm really enjoying the online and the offline parts of the American right these days.
That's great. Well, I I follow you, and I'm gonna comment and repost a lot of your things. So
Right.
just just a very quick anecdote about DC. So I've always okay. This is how I determine if a city where they are on the spectrum of left to right.
Hmm.
I travel all the time, and I count. I have a little bit of OCD. I count masks, and I
Oh,
do
okay. Yeah.
what's the percentage of masks in that region. And I swear, DC is worse than San Francisco.
Yeah, I was gonna say I haven't noticed any in a while, but I would comparatively there probably are. It's probably not great. So the
Yeah,
thing about DC is it's not, if you're conservative, it's not going to be the kind of city where you probably get to know your neighbor. It's probably not going to be the city where you make friends just at a bar walking down the street. Just because the default here, it's not just liberal, it's liberal and like professionally liberal. Like, yeah, you've worked at
yeah.
as a someone, you work for like the State Department in a career position for for a decade, although a lot of those people have been fired, fortunately. So the thing with DC though is but it's if you're conservative, this is just like where the action is. And these are we have right wing people running the country, and this is where the right wing people are who are doing that. So if you're right wing, you get plugged into like a really cool world basically. But
Right.
other than that, I've always if I was conservative but I wasn't in politics, I didn't have like a job in politics, wouldn't be a good wouldn't be much of a reason to be here. There's still good restaurants, still like nice parks, and the weather's not bad. A lot of parts of the country get far hotter and far colder in the summer and the winter respectively. But no, it's all about like when you have a Republican administration, especially this one, this historic one. It's a good place to be.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I might be going there the next couple of weeks, so I'm looking forward to that new feeling. I was there for the inauguration. It was an amazing
Nice.
experience. So
Have you been to Butterworth's?
Butterworth? No, is that
Yeah, so
a?
Butterworth's is kind of the go-to spot in DC for conservatives. And
Oh,
it's
okay.
Yeah, the people who own it are conservative. It's openly conservative. A lot of people throw events there, and the staffers and the people who work in the admin, they'll go for lunch or something. The main guy's on Twitter. The guy, one of the owners, they're multiple owners. They're all on Twitter. Like Raheem Kassam, if you're familiar with him, he's involved in. I don't know the guy, but I know he's involved in Butterworth's. So, yeah,
Ah,
it's great food. It's very highbrow. It's people in the first Trump term enjoyed hanging out at there was a dive bar down the street from, it was called Harry's, down the street from Trump Hotel. People would go to
okay.
the MAGA meetups, or they'd be at Trump Hotel hanging out with other conservatives. When they got tired of paying like $30 for a drink, they'd go to Harry's, which was kind of the dive bar there. Different experiences. But Harry shut down, unfortunately, and so this time around, with Trump back in office, we have Butterworths essentially,
I'll
and
keep.
I like it because it's dive bars are okay, but this is like a place you can have, you can get a nice meal, and it's very nice inside. So
I'll keep
hopefully I've
that in
sold
mind.
Butterworth to your audience, to you, if
Definitely.
you guys are in town. I'm not professionally associated with. I'm not getting paid to say this,
Oh,
but
yeah, yeah.
it's a good spot because your money is going to right wing people too, so you're keeping it in the movement, so to speak.
So that's definitely gonna be on my list. So that's
Excellent.
good. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
And
you.
again,
Yeah,
I want to stay in touch. I love to stay in touch with my guests to see how they're doing
absolutely.
in general. And again, I'll be in touch with you on social media every once in a while. And have a great rest of the week. It's Thursday, so we've got a couple more days before the weekend.
Almost there. Yeah.
All right.
Well, thank
Thanks
you.
so
I appreciate it. Take care.